Hey guys, welcome to my channel and thank you for watching. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make this super cute birthday wishes Shopkins cake using fondant. All recipes and written details will be in the description box below. Let's get right into it. So I'm starting out with a 6-inch cake, which I've leveled and split into 4 layers. I'm going to be brushing on some simple syrup to keep the cake nice and moist, and then I'm filling the cake with some cookie dough buttercream. Take the time to make sure that your filling is spread out evenly, and then repeat the process with the next layers of cake, ensuring that your cake is level when you have it all stacked up. I'm using a small offset spatula to take off any of the filling that kind of squished its way out, and then I'm going to chill my cake for around 10 minutes so that it's a little more firm when I go to apply my crumb coat and it doesn't slip all over the place. I'm using some Swiss meringue buttercream for this cake, and again using my small offset spatula, I'm just applying a thin dirty ice, or aka crumb coat. I'm really pressing it into the side of the cake so that I capture all the little crumbs. Don't worry about making your crumb coat look neat or perfect. It just needs to cover the entire surface of the cake. So you're going to throw it into the fridge for about 20 minutes so it's nice and firm. And then we're going to be applying our final layer of icing. This is where you do want to take your time. Don't rush yourself. I like to pile on a lot of icing on the top and sides. We are just going to be taking most of it off with our bench scraper. Kind of want to push the icing up towards the top of the cake to create those little peaks so that when you are smoothing the top and you're pulling your bench scraper in towards the center, it creates a nice clean edge. Now this cake is going to be 2 tiers, so I repeated that process on another 8-inch cake and set them both aside to chill for about a half hour. In the meantime, I'm going to get started with my fondant. I use homemade marshmallow fondant that needs to be kneaded on the counter for about at least 10 minutes. You really want to knead the crap out of your fondant because you want to activate the gums so it becomes a lot more elastic and easy to work with. I'm sprinkling my work surface with some cornstarch so my fondant doesn't stick, and I'm going to be rolling it out to about 1/8 of an inch thick. You want to make sure you have really clean hands and arms when you're working with fondant, especially white, because the lint on everything will show and it'll look bad. So don't do that. I'm going to be using a fondant smoother and picking up the sides of the fondant to smooth the top and push all that air out first. Then with my hand, I'm just going to work my way down the cake, pulling out the skirt and just using my hand to smooth the fondant against the cake. It can be pretty tricky, but once you do it a couple times, you'll get really used to it. You just want to keep fanning out the skirt and pulling it out and then pushing down with your palm. You really don't want to pull the fondant down. You just kind of want to press it gently against the cake. Keep an eye out for bubbles. And then once you've smoothed it all down to the bottom, you want to use your fondant smoother to just go around the edges and the top to make sure all the fondant's really adhered and there's no bubbles anywhere. I like to use my smoother to kind of push it in a bit at the bottom so when I go to cut off the excess, it doesn't pull out or pull away. I use a pizza cutter. I find it works easiest for me, but you could also use a really sharp knife to just kind of cut super close down to the bottom. You don't want to cut at an angle, so you're kind of cutting towards the cake, if that makes sense. You want to keep it nice and flush with the cake so you have a really nice seam. And I'm just repeating that process on my 2nd tier. For the pink fondant that's going to look like the icing on top of our Birthday Wishes Shopkin, I found it was really helpful to cut out a piece of parchment that was the same size as my cake, just to act as a guide. So I cut out a 6-inch round piece of parchment, and then I rolled it out and used an X-Acto knife, and I cut just a little bit outside that circle, just in a wavy pattern, just to look like the icing. I used a reference picture for the Shopkin, so that really helped, so I suggest doing that as well. So now I'm just placing that pink fondant on top of my yellow tier. It will take you a little while just to smooth down all the edges, and it might seem a little tricky and impossible at first, but just take your time, just keep pulling out the pieces, running your finger along the seam. Eventually it will smooth down, and then I'm just going over that with my fondant smoother. So now I'm just taking a little bit of piping gel, and with the paintbrush, I'm just going to mark out where I want that middle rope of white fondant to go to look like the icing in the middle of the cake. I'm basically just keeping my hand still again and moving the turntable so it's a nice even line. Just make sure you take your time and eyeball it so it's not crooked. Now I've just greased my work surface with some shortening, and I'm going to take some white fondant and I'm going to roll it out into a long rope. Then I'm going to take a look at my cake and decide where I want the back of the cake to be, where the rope's going to start and end. So that's where the seam is going to show. So you just want to pick, like, if there's a side where maybe you made a mistake or there's a dent in the cake or a mark, that's where you want the back to be. Once you've applied that white fondant to your cake, just go around and press it lightly in. You don't want to press too hard or leave any dents. I've just used some extra piping gel in spots where I thought maybe it wasn't adhered enough. And then I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and just mark out that line pattern just to give it a little more depth. For the sprinkles, I'm just rolling out a thin snake of blue fondant, cutting it in sprinkle-sized pieces, and adhering it to the cake again with some piping gel. Moving on to the mouth, I'm just using my X-Acto knife to kind of trace out where I'd like the mouth to go and how big I want it to be. And then I'm just cutting that piece out of the cake, and I'm going to replace it with some red fondant I've just eyeballed, and you're going to press that right into it. And then I'm just adding a thin strip of white fondant to give our Shopkins cake a little bit of a smile. I'm using some piping gel and adding on a little ball of yellow fondant to be our nose. And then I'm just going to mark out where I'd like the eyes to go before I stick them on. Just roll out a thin snake of black fondant and follow along the line that you marked. Do the exact same thing for the other eye, and then I'm just adding a little flick of black fondant at the end of that first line to be the little eyelash. I've dyed some white fondant, a really pale brown, and I'm just going to roll that out into a thin snake and add the eyebrows. For the candles, you're going to roll out a rope of white, blue, and pink fondant. I am lining them up side by side and grabbing either end and just twisting them. And keep twisting and twisting until it's nice and tight. And then you're going to roll all three colors out together on your table until they kind of just slightly blend into one another and become a nice thick line. Next, you're going to cut them to size and just put them aside for now just so they can firm up and be a little bit easier to handle when we put skewers through them later and add them to the cake. I'm going to add my top layer to my bottom tier now. What you're going to do to get that tilted look is cut out a piece of cake board to be a wedge shape and then take some fondant. I'm just using scrap fondant that I've rolled together here. And you're going to form that to fit the board size. So you're going to want to make it a wedge shape as well. I'm adhering that to the board with some piping gel and then placing it on the cake where I want the one side of the cake to tilt up. Unfortunately, my camera stopped filming at that point, but I did add a dowel beneath where that little wedge cake board is going to go to add some extra support. I added some piping gel to the top of that wedge just to help my top tier stick to that. And then I'm just placing it gently on top of the cake, moving it around and adjusting it to be where I want it. And then I'm just going to let that sit for a couple minutes just so that piping gel kind of firms up a bit and everything is stuck together. I'm now going to add the candles. I've just run a skewer through each one, and I'm going to make sure that I leave a little bit of skewer sticking out at the top so I have something to stick my fondant candle flames onto in a bit. For the whipped cream little piles that are going to be going in between each of the candles, I'm just rolling out some white fondant into a long teardrop shape so that one end is very thin and one end is very fat. And then you're just going to kind of coil it up into a mound and make sure the very tip is just sticking straight up so it's just a little pile of whipped cream. You can add whatever Shopkins character you'd like to the cake. I am going to be making Melanie Pips, the Green Delish Donut, and Kooky Cookie. To finish off my cake, I'm just going to add my flames. I've taken red, orange, and yellow fondant. I've just kind of mixed them together, not so they're blended, just so all the colors still show. And then I'm just forming fat little teardrop shapes. Add them to your cake along with the whipped cream mounds, and then I'm just rolling out balls of different colors of fondant to fill that empty space underneath the yellow tier to cover the wedge and to kind of hide the cardboard lip at the bottom of the cake. To finish it off, you're just going to add the Shopkins characters that you made using a little bit of piping gel, and there you have it. You have your super cute, adorable Shopkins cake.